All right, welcome back to the House Government Operations and Military Affairs Committee on this lovely Thursday afternoon. We're here to pick up our work on the recommendations of the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Committee. And we have a draft 4.3, which Mr. Devlin's going to walk us through. So Tim, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Chair McCarthy. Excuse me. For the record, my name is Tim Devlin, Legislative Counsel, and you'll have to forgive me. I have a little bit of a frog in my throat. I'll try to make do, be as clear as possible. One moment. Apologies. For you, you do have draft 4.3 of the committee bill, numbered draft request 23-0907. The draft is from today. Let's see, March 16th, stamped at 2:30 p.m. The differences from the last iteration that the committee reviewed have been highlighted. So there are some there's some language in the statement of purpose is introduced, as modified, is cleaned up to reflect this more substantive changes later on. And really, you'll see the only differences between version 3 and version 4.3 are really on the bottom of page 4 in section 3, having to do with category B conduct, and one a new bit that was actually in a prior version, so look a little bit familiar in I, and then a clarification to H. Really, what you see is a moving from the on duty or off duty language from the intro language, or sorry, I should say the higher up kind of umbrella language in 2 category B conduct, to the actual subcategories themselves, so that the on or off duty language would no longer qualify the enumerated list of A through, well, now I, but really will only pertain to the last 2, that is H and I. And Chair McCarthy, I'm happy to just dive into that and read through that language if you'd like, or would you like me to start somewhere else?
Yeah, I think if you could just orient us on section 3 to kind of how the mechanics work and are different from what we saw before, that would be great.
Sure. So section 3 will amend Title 20 VSA 2401. This is the definition sections that has both categories A and B conduct. Category A conduct, which is no longer being addressed and wasn't yesterday or a few days ago when the committee was looking at it, is more high level conducts, categories of conduct that could wind up in the, if violating of, that is, could wind up in the suspension or termination of a law enforcement officer's certification to practice law enforcement duties. Category B is of issue here. It begins on line 2, and I think it's easiest to characterize it by just reading the plain words. Category B conduct means gross professional misconduct amounting to actions on duty or under the authority of the state, or both, that involve willful failure to comply with the state required policy, or substantial deviation from professional conduct as defined by the law enforcement agency's policy, or if not defined by the agency's policy, then as defined by council policy, and shall include, amongst other things, the new categories in this bill that this bill will add are H and I. H reads, while on duty or off duty, attempting to cause or causing physical harm to a family or household member, or placing a family or household member in fear of serious imminent physical harm. Or, and this is the new language that has been added since the version 3 that the committee last reviewed, while on duty or off duty, a violation of the domestic violence involving law enforcement model policy adopted pursuant to section 2365 of this title. And also, I should add, there's actually new language in section 4 as well, the next one, which reiterates these 2 new categories, however, puts it in the context of the issue of when category B conduct first offense, and this is pertains to the discussion about what I think was colloquially being thrown around as a second bite of the apple, when the Vermont Criminal Justice Council can actually take disciplinary action on the first instance of one of these violations versus waiting for a second instance.
Representative Hanko.
Thank you. So Tim, H and I tell what the infractions are. And then in section 4, that's built on further by saying that for lack of a better word, consequences of those infractions will occur after a first offense. Is that what you're saying? I'd kind of prefer to take one section at a time, but you just did 2 sections, so I'm trying to piece them together.
Tim, would it help me to kind of recontextualize this whole thing?
Sure, if you like.
Because we've been working in this world of category B conduct. So the original idea that was in this was that we would have all on or off duty conduct that was category B could be subject of a complaint that would go to the Criminal Justice Council, like we talked about this morning when we were discussing the idea of having untruthfulness, bias from a Brady letter. Still in that same world of category B conduct, but this is the stuff we've been talking about much more, which is a violation of the model policy, domestic violence involving law enforcement model policy, or the actual conduct that would result in a final relief from abuse order. So that's what our new H and I. So those are the new conduct. And then when we get down into the next section, what we're doing is saying those are part of the enumerated things that the Criminal Justice Council can act on the first time. So we're saying we got these 2 new pieces that we've been talking about as we've been working on this bill over the last few weeks. And then we've also got them enumerated, which has also been a part. The only real difference here in this draft from the previous draft that we saw the other day is that now made it really explicitly clear that the violation of the model policy and the behavior that would result in the conduct that would result in a final relief from abuse order, those 2 pieces, H and I, are the only ones where the off-duty behavior could be the subject of the complaint and result in an investigation and sanctioned by the Criminal Justice Council.
So if that's the case, then why does page 5, line 11, line 12 say on duty or off duty?
Because for 24012H and 24012I,
Okay.
it's both on and off. Those are the the only 2 times.
Farther up, line 9, prior to line 9, it says, is it implied then that that's only on duty? Lines 4 through 10?
That's the intent. We're going to hear from both law enforcement and the Attorney General's office subsequently after we have Tim do the walkthrough. So it's best for them who are subject matter experts to answer that question.
Okay, and one other question, section 2365 that enumerates, or not enumerates, it doesn't. It just gives permission for someone, the council, to set up a model policy, because we don't yet know what that model policy is, correct?
So there's a 2010 model policy, and you'll recall we heard testimony from the lead chair, Chief Burke, who I believe, is on Zoom. So we can ask Chief Burke about that. But it's been my understanding since early testimony on this bill that the idea here is that they'll update the 2010 policy by the end of this calendar year, and that the bill currently envisions that law enforcement agencies will be required to adopt that model policy by the middle of 2024. I think it's July 1st or 15th in here. Yeah, July 1st.
Yeah.
2024, so that we're anticipating that the ask that we had from the law enforcement leaders, I believe both the state police and Chief Burke, was that we would make sure that we're not referencing the 2010 model policy, but anticipating the model policy that is going to be finalized by the end of this year, and then not putting it as a requirement for law enforcement agencies to adopt it until the middle of next year, to give them time to both get it finished and then get the word out and get all of the law enforcement agencies that are in the state to adopt it.
And is there somewhere that says that July 1st date? Because I saw
It's in
the
section one.
January 1st.
Yeah, it's in section 1. It's right up at the top of page 2. It's probably a good segue to get some people who are smarter and more knowledgeable than I am testifying instead of us talking through it. Sorry about that. So I think first I have on my list Aaron Jacobson from the Attorney General's office. So Aaron, do you want to take the
But you just said you wanted someone smarter and more knowledgeable.
that's kind of you. That's very funny, and I appreciate that. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be back. For the record, Erin Jacobson, Assistant Attorney General, and I am the co-director of our office's Community Justice Unit. Good afternoon, and thank you all for your leadership on this, for your patience. I know heads were exploding at one point. And I know that it's been a lot to follow because we've kind of been on a journey with this. We started in one place and we ended up in another, but I'm sure you're experiencing that with all of your bills. Nonetheless, I do appreciate the patience and the dedication that it's required to stick with this bill, and I'm very grateful. I'm here today to express our office's support for Committee Bill 230907 and for its ability to help address the very serious issue of officer-involved domestic violence. So in addition to thanking all of you, I also do want to give a shout out to all the stakeholders that we've been having conversations with and working with and trying to build consensus. We did not ever come to perfect consensus. There's still a few things we do not agree on, but nonetheless, it's really been an honor and a privilege to work with everybody. And so I would like to focus on where we do have consensus, and I think that's what this draft of this bill reflects. So where we do all agree is that under current law, there really were some fairly serious limitations on the council's ability to sanction officers involved in abusive conduct of household or family members. And it was really a problematic gap, and that's what this bill is trying to fix. We also all recognized that the most likely scenario in which an officer would engage in abusive conduct is off-duty, and therefore that off-duty domestic violence conduct should be sanctionable as well. Finally, all of the stakeholders also agreed that the council should be able to consider sanctions for an officer the first time such abuse comes to light. And so on all of those points, we agree, and that those goals and those policy efforts are reflected in 230907 in this current draft. So I would respectfully urge the committee to vote in favor of 230907. I can assure you where folks might want to add provisions or modify them, perhaps, for example, by expanding council discretion to take up all first-time category B offenses. You heard that from Chair Sorrell. These conversations can continue, and they will. For now, though, our office supports this bill, and so we would ask you to vote in favor of it, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions if you have any remaining.
Aaron, I want to return the thanks for the diligence and the ability to compromise. I know that stakeholders worked to try to come to consensus. There were some real sticking points around how we structure this bill and the question of on duty versus off duty. We had a pretty, I would say, an intense conversation the other day. I think it was constructive about how serious some of the Category B conduct is. I think that all of us want to make sure that we, have a bill that we can get a broad consensus on amongst stakeholders, amongst the legislators who are working on it. I think this bill accomplishes the recommendations of the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Commission. I also think it leaves in its current draft work to do. And it seems like that's kind of what you're getting at, is a shared sense that we've made some progress here. We've achieved the specific recommendations, but there's probably some more work that we have to do.
I would agree with all of that. I would hedge a little bit and say that maybe in coming to some of the compromises, maybe not all of the recommendations of the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Commission report are reflected herein, but certainly those most important pieces, which is really to provide the council a way to sanction officers who are engaging in domestic violence, and that recognition that that kind of behavior is very likely to happen off duty. And neither of those under current law are sanctionable. And so that was really the most critical thing that we were trying to address here. And again, with your leadership, that's happened, and I really appreciate it.
Any other questions for Aaron? Representative Hancock.
I just have like kind of a generic question. Other public safety officials would fall under this, or I guess I should say, it looks like our regular police forces and constables, but what about, like, are there other law enforcement agencies in Vermont who would fall under this?
All law enforcement who is certified by the Vermont Criminal Justice Council would be covered by this.
And does that not include like I don't even know if they're certified, like DMV enforcement officers?
Yeah.
Fish and
Or
wildlife,
fish and
liquor
wildlife,
inspectors.
yeah.
liquor inspectors, yep.
Yep.
All three sheriff levels?
Yes.
Certified?
I would say so all state level, any sworn officers, certified officers that are certified at the state level. So that's all your municipal, county, and state police, all of those agencies that are under our jurisdiction. There is only one certification to be a law enforcement officer that's certified in the state of Vermont, and that's covered by the Criminal Justice Council. Definitely important to zoom out and stay rooted in some of our high level jurisdictions.
One more zoom out that I would just kind of like for the record to remind everybody about is that, one interest of the council, and it is reflected in the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Report, is to really just to be able to make sure that this kind of conduct gets to the council as soon as possible. And it's not that just because that happens, that does not necessarily mean that every law enforcement officer will therefore automatically be decertified. There's a whole range of sanctions that the council can consider and does consider in thinking about what is the most appropriate way to deal with the misconduct. And so, one interest is to make sure that, for example, if an officer is engaging in problematic behavior, maybe one consideration is, does the officer need some help too? And so that is an interest of the Professional Regulation Subcommittee of the council. That's an interest of the council, and that's an interest of law enforcement agencies. And so I think you see that in the recommendations that the council be able to sanction first offenses. And in this bill, the council can sanction first offenses of domestic violence conduct. And that's really critical. So glad to see that still in this bill.
All Representative Henko.
Thank you. And when there is sanctioning taking place, is there a prescribed formula of how that takes place? Like after a certain number of days, such and such will happen, after a certain hearing, such and such happens, or is it up to the consensus of the council to make a decision what to do with that officer?
So generally what happens is the misconduct comes before the council's professional regulation subcommittee. And as a group, they consider what they are going to recommend to the full council for our vote. And so with the work around considering specific sanctions and what they look like and timelines, that would happen in the subcommittee. And that is also where the officer who has allegedly committed the misconduct has legal counsel and has due process to think about what that officer might agree to or not agree to. And it's a negotiation and conversational process.
Any other questions for Aaron? All right. Thank you for being with us, Aaron.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
For all your work on this bill.
Thank you.
So next up, Sarah Robinson's with us remotely from the network. Thanks for being back.
Thank you so much for having me. And sorry, I'm not able to join you in person today. But I just really wanted to echo a lot of what you just heard from Aaron Jacobson from the Attorney General's office in terms of thanks to the committee and also to the group of stakeholders that really came together and did the hard work around this bill. And I echo Aaron and let you know that, the network fully supports this draft of the bill. And we hope that the committee will support it as well. We feel like it achieves the primary policy objectives, which was really to make sure that the Vermont Criminal Justice Council, both in cases where there may be kind of conduct related to that gives rise to a relief from abuse order, and also a violation of a statewide domestic violence policy, that in both of those instances, the Criminal Justice Council would be able to take action after a first offense. So I feel like the language accomplishes this. There are also other really important components of this bill that didn't get quite the attention, but the data components and the other sections of the bill are also equally important. And we look forward to walking this bill all the way across the finish line. So I'm just keeping it short and sweet. Would be happy to answer any questions, but we support the current draft of the bill.
Great. Thanks so much, Sarah. And I know you also did a whole bunch of work in trying to make the compromise that we've got before us happen. So thank you for all of your diligence and willingness to pull conversations together and look at different ways to try to solve the concern. So thank you.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
Any questions for Sarah? All right. Well, I'll invite you to stick around, Sarah. Next up, Mike O'Neill from the State Troopers Association. Had a little mental blank right there, Mike. Please.
Good afternoon. Mike O'Neill. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Troopers Association. It's the first time I've been in this year, so many of you I don't know. I appreciate the opportunity to get to know some of you and be in to testify today. I did come into this a little bit late, so I'll admit some of it I haven't weighed in with many of the groups that have testified on this. And generally, I think we can agree with the draft today. Well, we have some small concerns, but just for a little bit of background, my role now is representing troopers on the other side of some of these issues when there's allegations against them. And it is a much more complicated process than just the council process. VSP, like all agencies, must have a code of conduct and an internal affairs process to address allegations. And on issues like this, there generally is going to be either serious discipline or termination at the agency level, and it's also going to the council. So there's two things going on at the same time. So this isn't the only place it's addressed. These officers may be removed from a department anyway when they're facing this issue. And with VSP, I can tell you most likely they would be. We have a very strict code of conduct, and I think our commissioner and the colonel do a very good job of enforcing it. We as a union fully support what's in Act 56. I worked several years ago with this committee and the Senate committee to create Act 56, worked with Director Gauthier at the time to come to where it is now. And at the time we expected we'd probably continue to have discussions about what's in it. I imagine it's always going to be evolving and changing. So as far as the draft today, like I said, I think this is something we can support and work with on the other side of the Senate for some of the small concerns we have. I appreciate the change in the language on duty or off duty being in this specifically because Part B was designed to deal with on duty conduct. But we agree anything with domestic violence is probably mostly going to be off duty and it is necessary. The small concern I have, I guess it's not small, but something to address when this goes over to the Senate, if it goes there, is the language that comes from the RFA language, attempting to cause or causing physical harm to a family member, we completely agree with. Or placing a family or household member in fear of serious imminent physical harm. Proving fear is going to be difficult. It's an emotion that we're talking about, and how that's proven may be difficult. There will be investigations in regard to this. When someone applies for an RFA, it is based on a statement. There's no investigation of the facts at the time a judge is reviewing a statement of a victim, and that standard makes complete sense in that setting. But when you're doing an investigation, my concern is that fear may be difficult to prove. There's a lot of factors involved there. So while we do support generally where this is at, that is one of the concerns we would have with it. But overall, I think we can work on the Senate side with where this is at if it does go over there.
So thank you for your willingness to be open to supporting this and continuing to work on it. The evolution of this is that where we started was, just for reminding the committee, and since as you said, Mike, you came to this conversation as we were working on the drafts, was that we started with a place of just saying if there's a relief from a final abuse order, or if there's a final relief from abuse order, that would be category A. And so we went down to category B, and then we went down to the conduct. So the definition of the things that can result in an RFA are now in the language. And I think some of the conversations that are happening elsewhere in this building, especially around what contemplates abuse, for instance, the controlling behavior and that kind of thing that's been discussed in the judiciary bill, that's a sister bill to this one. Those are things that we need to continue to work on together. So I appreciate your openness to being.
We fully understand the need for this, the importance of it, but it's just a concern we have with the language.
Mm-hmm. Representative Henke.
Yeah, thank you. So can you remind me, is this language about the fear of part of that? I feel like I recall an attorney telling us that it is part of the language of a final relief from abuse order.
In my understanding,
I believe that is correct, yes. And I'm not an attorney, so please. My understanding is the standard for granting an order is much different than the standard of proving the conduct through an investigation. And that's just the issue I wanted to raise, because I want to ensure that due process rights are also protected in doing this, so that there's protections on both sides. But we agree that this is a necessary step.
Representative.
Yeah, so that's the part about this that has been making me uncomfortable, and I think I voiced that earlier. Was it's very difficult to quantify what fear of serious imminent physical harm is, and I've come across bills like this in the past in other committees where I've not been able to vote for them because I don't really understand how you measure that, and to place it in statute. I'm not really sure how you carry it out once you put it in statute. So
Can I
that's my
maybe ask
concern.
Legislative counsel, so Tim, I don't need you to answer this right now, but if you could, as we're talking with our other witnesses, confirm for us that this definition of the conduct that could result in a relief from abuse order is taken from the relief from abuse order statutes.
Yes, I'll try to look into that now.
Definition of
Yeah.
fear that applies to this.
Yeah.
I would love to see it.
That would be really helpful. And if one of your colleagues, like, I'm not sure if Ben or Michelle or one of the other members of Ledge Council could help us contextualize that. We compromised, when I say we, the stakeholders and those of us who are working on various drafts, we're really trying to work through the concerns that were brought by law enforcement over the last few weeks. And I think we've arrived at a place where the language here does reflect that, but I do want to ask Ledge Council to try to confirm that to address your concern, Representative Hango. So great, Mike, anything else you want to tell us?
I think that covers it.
Great, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Chief Burke, are you with us there on Zoom?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks for being back with us on this.
Certainly. Thanks for having me in. Appreciate your time. Just to echo again, really appreciate the collaboration on this bill. I speak on behalf of the LEAB when I tell you that we are prepared to engage in the model policy development and adhere to the timelines that are outlined in the draft in which you're going to vote on this afternoon. And I have been in communication with the Vermont Chiefs Association for whom I represent as well. And we are in support of this bill in its current status. So again, thanks to everyone and for your patience in the committee room. Really appreciate it. This is a critical piece of legislation that we're happy to see moving forward. I'm happy to answer any questions.
We really, really deeply appreciate the willingness to come together and find a way to move most of this forward. So thank you for the work and the time and bringing folks together to have the association endorse the current draft. I really appreciate that.
Of course. Thank you.
Questions for Chief Burke? No, we used up all our energy this morning or something here. I don't, or maybe we've just seen too many drafts of this bill, but that's sometimes how it rolls here. So thanks, Chief. I'll invite you to stick around too for the rest of the conversation, but thank you so much for being here. The last person I have on the list to testify today is I want to welcome back Tucker Jones from the department. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for having me back. With the invitation to come back, I really just wanted to thank you personally, but also the rest of the committee for your work on this and your patience with us as we worked back and forth on the language among the stakeholders. I think, it was challenging because we were right at the end when we were going back and forth on the language, but I think the net result is a stronger bill, a clearer bill. And I also want to extend my gratitude to Sarah and Aaron and Chief and Chair Sorrell, who's not here, for having those conversations. We approached this whole topic, in a spirit of collaboration, and we'll continue to do so. It's obviously a very important topic, and we're just appreciative of everyone's work on it. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you too for working with the team to come up with this compromise. I think you brought up Chair Sorrell, and he was invited and did email that while he couldn't make it today, generally supportive. I think the one of the things that we had discussed in the context of this bill was that there was a desire from the Criminal Justice Council to, as opposed to just enumerating these two additional pieces that could be acted on with the first complaint that are category B conduct, that they wanted to have the discretion on the full list and to maybe have a stop enumerating additional pieces. I didn't want that conversation to hold this bill and these recommendations up. But I think it's a conversation that's worth doing some due diligence on later this biennium. So kind of said, you know, we'll put that conversation in the parking lot for the moment. But I think it's a thing worth discussing because, you know, as we had talked about when you were here the other day, most of the behavior, the conduct in category B, it's pretty serious. And I think we could give some discretion to the Criminal Justice Council to act on that in the first instance, but we're not going to do that here in the context of this bill. I don't want it to hold it up. And that's one of the things we left on the wayside from our conversation. I just want to make that clear for the committee.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, I just, we look forward to continuing the conversation on the scope of council authority generally. And, you know, I think it is an area that it's another area will be a willing collaborator. And I think there's an areas there that will find broad consensus. I think it is probably best for this bill to move this on and then continue that conversation. And, you know, this is the committee of jurisdiction for that subject matter. And so we look forward to continue to work with this committee on that topic, whether it's this session or next. So, and there are a number of other bills too that touch on, for example, S-17, which is coming perhaps your way soon. So there's other bills that are touching on the same subject. And that conversation will continue in a variety of forms. So I look forward to that.
All right. Well, thanks for your work and the department's support of this latest draft that's on the table. Committee, any questions for Mr. Jones with the department's perspective? Tim, are you still there with us?
Yes, I am.
Or if you have any further info, you can enlighten us about the relief
Yes.
from
Deputy Director Robinson was kind enough to pass on the exact statutory citation, which is 15 VSA 1101. It is in definition section. And I'll just read the pertinent part. The following words, as used in the subchapter, shall have this following meaning. 1, abuse means the occurrence of one or more of the following actions between family or household members. Subdivision B, placing another in fear of imminent serious physical harm. So that is the precise language borrowed from existing statute.
We had looked at this, the next paragraph actually, when we were talking about the definition of a household member just the other day. So we've been looking at 15 VSA 1101 quite a bit. Representative Hingo, go ahead.
I have a question, Tim, about 15 VSA 1103 when requests for relief.
Okay.
So that the language in that is quote, A, large letter A, there is a danger of further abuse, unquote, which sounds a little bit different than what you cited in 1101, which I'm just pulling up now, which is large letter B, placing another in fear of imminent serious physical harm, which also is a little bit different from.
So Representative
Same
Hingo,
thing.
I want to just take one big step back to try to understand your concern before we try to move the bill forward. So what we've done here by establishing a violation of the model policy and also the conduct, but not the fact of a relief from abuse order as a potential trigger for investigation sanctioned by the Criminal Justice Council, that still would need to have a complaint. And I think in practice, from all the testimony we've heard, we would only get the complaint and the investigation of this behavior from a law enforcement officer that could lead to potential sanction that is appealable, so there's still due process even after the criminal justice counsel, only if there was a final relief from abuse order, the way this is structured. I mean, I think in practice, you know, the law enforcement wants us to make sure that we're talking about the conduct and not the fact of the relief from abuse order. But in practice, the relief from abuse order is going to be the piece that is over here, and then the complaint that could come before the council, and only could, it doesn't necessarily have to, but the trigger there is really going to be a final relief from abuse order. And that's why this language is tied to it from 1101 and not 1103 or another piece of statute. That's the understanding that I've been given both from legislative counsel's testimony and from Aaron.
I guess you lost me, and I apologize for that. This is all new terminology for me. So my concern, in very basic terms, is perception versus what really happened.
So be like perceived actual.
Yeah,
Okay, no, I'm just making
Yeah.
sure I'm understanding what you're saying.
yeah.
Yeah, so so you're concerned that there could be a complaint against an officer about creating fear, intimidating a household member. And then that complaint could be just about the fear or intimidation.
I don't know. I find it hard to put this fear of serious imminent physical harm in black and white terms. It doesn't give me anything to go on. If I were one of the appointed members of the Criminal Justice Council, I would not feel confident in acting on that. If someone came to us and said, we have fear of serious imminent physical harm without any kind of proof of that.
Yeah, I think if there.
It's very subjective.
I think if there wasn't any proof, then there wouldn't be an investigation. The whole idea of what the Criminal Justice Council does, from all the testimony we've heard over the last few weeks, is to go through an investigatory process to determine whether it's appropriate to sanction an enforcement officer. I think Representative Hoover can.
Well, I asked that question of the Attorney General. How do you charge this? Because it's so broad.
Oh, yeah, I
and vague.
remember you asking that.
And eventually we got to the answer being, that's essentially the element of our judicial system where we take evidence, we weigh the balance on the scale, and decide the most preponderance wins. So, I mean, at some point in time, we have to revert back to the system that we use to make a proper determination.
But is this really going through a judicial process, as we know, a judicial process? This is an appointed board, right? And it's basically a jury of your peers, correct? And I mean, like, I don't know.
So
I
essentially
don't know
what
what I'm
Representative
asking.
Hoover, you're saying is the fear, there's the perception of fear on the
Somebody's gonna-
individual.
Yeah, somebody's going to
But then there's
question
the
whether the
safety
fear
and
is
then
valid.
the judiciary systems,
Yeah.
judicial systems,
I mean, when you go,
job to weigh the evidence and
when you
then,
go for the relief from abuse, you get basically one judge making a decision about the validity of it. If you go to a trial, if it becomes criminal, then you go to the jury, maybe, unless you waive. When you go to this commission, you basically are in front of sort of your peers.
I guess sort of saying that now, it's just I'm getting a little bit more like interpretive words, but like fear and intimidation, it's kind of the same thing, right? Intimidation can also be.
Yeah, and let's all just take a step back and realize that what we're talking about here is the Criminal Justice Council's professional regulation capacity and the determination of whether it makes sense for there to be some sanction, a suspension or a termination of a law enforcement certification. So we're going back to the recommendations of domestic violence fatality review report. They recommended we take these 2 steps. We've come a long way down the line to say it's the conduct and the violation of the model policy that will be adopted and then required to be adopted by all the agencies next year. So those 2 pieces. And what we're talking about here is the ability for the Criminal Justice Council in their certification capacity to decide whether the facts of a relief from abuse order, the conduct itself, warrants them doing some sanction. And then if the law enforcement officer, if they overstep and the law enforcement officer wants to appeal that, they absolutely can do that to the courts, and then it becomes a judicial. It's not as if the Criminal Justice Council has a final say. So I want to err on the side because of what I read in that report and because of the testimony we've heard. And what we're really trying to do here is prevent domestic violence related fatalities. That's the underpinning value that we all have here, is to use the reference in the same way that it's done with relief from abuse order. And we can, we are going to have other vehicles to continue to work on category B conduct and what's appropriate for that. And as Mr. O'Neill said, and Mr. Jones said, this is definitely not the last time we're going to be looking at some of the professional regulation and conduct definitions here. So, Representative Hendrick, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't think I got an answer from Attorney Devlin about what the difference between 1101 and 1103 are and why we're using one and not the other.
Is that something, Aaron, that you might be able to address? Because I think that's outside of Attorney Devlin's typical policy work.
Aaron Jacobson, Attorney General's office. So the language that is in the current bill comes directly from the RFA statute's definition of abuse. Putting someone in imminent fear of physical harm is abuse according to our laws. And at the beginning of this process, it was our recommendation that the sanctionable conduct be when you are subject to a final RFA. There was some concerns raised about that by law enforcement. The compromise was to focus on the conduct because category B focuses on conduct. And so then we had to ask ourselves, fine, if the issuance of an RFA doesn't trigger council action, that we want to talk about conduct, what is the conduct? And so we went straight to the definition section of the RFA statute because that is the conduct that will allow you to get an RFA.
And that's which one? Because now I'm totally confused. I specifically asked for the difference between 1101 and 1103.
And so 1103, and can you remind me, what are you asking about 1103? Like, why is the language different?
Yeah, I guess to me, to a layperson, it doesn't really make sense that there would be 2 different definitions or explanations of why someone would ask for relief from abuse, but a different definition for abuse.
Well, so if when you're asking for a relief from abuse order, the first thing you have to prove is that that behavior or the actions that you're trying to stop are abuse. And then the other thing you would have to prove is that this is ongoing and that you have suffered this and that you still fear it. If it's just I suffered abuse 6 years ago and I haven't seen that person since, I'm not going to be able to get a relief from abuse order, even if it was abuse under the statute. I still have to be able to prove that I'm in fear of imminent harm, because it's a protection order. It's to protect you from future harm. So that's, I think those are the two differences you're talking about.
And is that 1103?
1103, yes, is how you would have to prove that there is that danger of future abuse.
Right, but isn't that the same thing as danger of imminent harm? That it could happen anytime?
In the future?
Anytime, now, tomorrow, 3 years from now, so why is 1101 different?
1101 is just trying to define what is abuse. And 1103 tells you what you would have to prove about the fact that that abuse is something that you still fear because it could continue to happen.
Okay, I guess it's splitting hairs, and I'm not an attorney, and I'm not well-versed in law enforcement, so I will just plead ignorance on this, that I can't figure out the difference. Why we would have this same concept, but use different language.
Aaron, would it be fair to say that 1101 is the definition of abuse? 1103 outlines the things that you need to do to get an RFA. So they're
Right.
not, it's more about the process versus the thing.
And I understand that, but to me, it's like one and the same. So why don't you just use the same information or the same words to convey the same information? Because they're both saying that you have a fear that this could happen to you again.
I guess what I come back to is that we've heard today from a pretty diverse group of stakeholders who've worked really hard on this bill and tried to root it in the recommendations of the report that we received and address the concerns that were brought up by law enforcement leaders and the department. And now we have consensus for a draft that I think, it's reflective of exactly the RFA language, but doesn't reflect the final relief from abuse order itself. I think we can keep working on trying to understand this, but now we've got a bill in front of us to move that we've got all of the people who've been involved in crafting it saying, yes, this is worth voting for, and we can be happy with this. So that's kind of where I'm coming down at this point. And I do appreciate that there is ambiguity in the idea of what constitutes imminent fear, but I believe from the limited work that I have with my wife working as a person who is an advocate when she was working at Voices Against Violence, and that the final relief from abuse order is not ex parte, and what we're really trying to do here is create a parallel thing where there's already a reasonably high bar, and we're talking about category B conduct, not A, pretty reasonably high bar for what somebody has to prove to get a final relief from abuse order. And then there's a lot of due process through the criminal justice council and appeals if there's an issue. So I think that the concern about imminent fear in that definition is really about precedent and what happens in courts. And that's outside of what we do here. We've got to trust our subject matter experts and the leaders who've testified here today that said this meets with this addresses our concerns. So I think we've come to the end of the road for this bill for this committee at this point before crossover. So thank you, Aaron, for coming back up. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
So Attorney Devlin's walked us through the bill and the changes. I think we've seen this language many a time. But are there any remaining questions or a need to take another stroll through? I'm not seeing any hands. Unless there are any further questions or concerns, I'd entertain a motion to move draft 4.3.
Quick word order, serious imminent versus imminent serious.
As long as it's the same as what's in 1101, I'm happy.
Whether the order, it's not in the same order as 1101. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, that's a really important.
So it's,
That comes first.
Hey, Tim,
Yes,
could you
I'll double check that.
double check that for me?
So
Good catch.
Your competition.
this should be imminent serious physical harm, not serious imminent. So imminent serious. We can make that change.
That makes more sense.
Tim, I'm gonna say that we could give you a few minutes to make that change and get us a final draft by pushing pause on this for a moment. I believe we've reached the 3:45 mark and could take a quick look at the latest version of the Cybersecurity Council bill and then come right back to this once you have the next draft done. I don't think that'll take very long.
Nope, that should just be a few minutes. I'll do that.
Great.
Right.
Thanks so much. All right, committee. So I think we're getting close, but I really appreciate, I probably would never have noticed two words out of order like that. So good catch, Representative Chase. Becky's here right on cue. It's 3:45. So perfect timing. We'll use it efficiently. So we're just about ready to switch gears and take up the H291. So
So if you don't mind, Adam can walk you through.
great. Adam, if you'd like to take the witness chair. Becky, I don't know if you want to come up with Adam. But
He's okay.
Okay, great. I think we have, I actually didn't double check that we've got the little amendment we did adding vital.
Don't see it unless we have to refresh.
Under Adam.
Under Adam Washburn, yeah, there should be a draft 1.2 up at the top of our Thursday, March 16th documents. I'll let the committee kind of just pull up the current draft. Would you like to introduce yourself for the record, Adam?
Absolutely. Adam Washburn. I'm a student clinician with the Office of Legislative Counsel. I'm here to talk about an amendment to H291.
Thanks for being with us. So tell us about the amendment.
Absolutely. So this is an instance of amendment. We have three general amendments to go through. The first is going to be on page 3, lines 5 and 6. And it's going to start by in section 4662 and subdivision B11. We're going to start by striking out and then in subdivision 12 by striking out the period and inserting in lieu thereof a semicolon and then adding a new subdivision 3 to read the president of the Vermont Technological Leaders or designee.
One more member as requested. Any questions for Adam on that addition? I think that's what we asked for earlier today. All right, not seeing any hands.
Awesome. The second amendment is going to be on page 7, lines 5. And that is going to add in section 4663 subdivision B2. We're going to insert the word care after Green Mountain so that it reads Green Mountain Care Board.
That was my catch this morning. So we've got a lot of eagle eyes around the room today.
Oh, good.
Any questions about that, it looks like. All right.
And then finally, on the very last page, we're going to strike out the current section 3 effective date in its entirety and insert a new section 3 and a section 4 to read as follows. The new section 3 will be a repeal section I will read 20 VSA Chapter 208 Cybersecurity is repealed on June 30th, 2026. And then the new Section 4 will be the effective date, and the act will take effect on July 1st, 2023.
So we've got a sunset in there to make Representatives Gannon and LeClaire proud. Any questions for Adam about our instances of amendment? Are there any further questions about the council, the bill itself? Entertain a motion to recommend H291 favorably when amended by this amendment that we've just heard before us, which is amendment draft 1.2. Where are we? Yeah, because what we've got here is the same issue we had this morning where we're getting used to instances of amendment when we've been used to doing strike calls. So bear with us, Adam. Yeah, so this is draft 1.2 with a time stamp of 12:30 p.m. Any further discussion? Shall I commence to call the roll?
Representative Byron,
Yes.
Representative Boyden, yes. Representative Hango,
Yes.
Representative Morgan,
Yes.
Representative Hooper of Burlington,
Yes.
Representative Mariki,
Yes.
Representative Chase,
Yes.
Representative Waters Evans,
Yes.
Representative Hooper of Randolph,
Yes.
Representative Nugent, Representative Higley,
Yes.
Representative McCarthy,
Yes.
11-0-1.
And Representative Chase, would you like the honor of reporting the Cybersecurity Council bill?
You want? If nobody else wants to run with it, sure.
I think this one's your baby. I think this is all you. So
Stand up on the floor and talk.
if Adam and Becky could make sure we get a clean draft of the amendment, and then we'll Representative Chase will have you email the amendment and the vote. Andrea will have instructions for you to the clerk's office to make sure we get that in. You don't have to run the paper bill up anymore like the old days.
Good.
Well, Adam, nicely done. Thanks for being with us and for working on the bill. Was this the first time you've done a walkthrough?
It is actually, yeah.
Oh, hey, just smooth. You're a cool customer,
Well
man.
played.
I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
He doesn't get any better.
No? Oh, that's good to know.
Thank you very much, Becky.
Oh man, I was like, wow, that really is back. It so is. I went to
So great. We're just gonna give the internet a minute to get our draft 4.4 with the words in the right order.
Wait for the hamsters to run through the pipes.
Hamsters going.
I always wondered how.
That's what I always imagined the internet being. Is
There's a little cage camped at Andrea's desk.
hamsters.
They drop it off and.
Good. I don't want to know how it works, so thank you.
so my friends. Someday I gotta turn it. It's so bad. I love it.
But it's not ironic at all. It's
No,
like, it's totally legitimate.
legit.
Okay. I just refreshed and I now see final draft. That is, that might be too optimistic. I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. I really do hope.
We're in a holding pattern right here. Right?
We,
Yeah, that's what I thought, yeah. I won't have to go to this area, that probably just got voted out 11-0.
they voted out so that's a good thing for the committee. You know, remember when we took a little testimony on the dram shop issue? Yeah. Judiciary just voted out that bill 11-0.
11-0, and it's like a very well thought out, crafted, yeah. That problem just got moved along in a very important step, so.
Just doing a lot of good work.
That's where my,
over here
where
in
my
the
phone's been
house.
blowing up the last few minutes.
Does everybody have draft 4.4 up?
Clearly, that's a no. Hold, please.
All right, so Tim, do you want to?
Sure.
You want to get
Thank you, Chair McCarthy. Again, for the record, my name is Tim Devlin, Legislative Counsel. Before you, you now have draft 4.4 of draft requesting committee bill 23-0907. There are two changes in here, and I really haven't bothered highlighting them, but it's about the word order, and it appears in two different places. Once on page 4, line 15, will now read, "In fear of imminent serious physical harm." And then again, on page 5, line 14, 13 breaking into 14 will read, "In fear of imminent serious harm, physical harm." And those are the only two changes since the last iteration.
We have 2 minutes to read through this.
Sure.
Thanks.
We're just going to take a minute, let the committee take another look, make sure we don't have any other words that are flipped or anything like that. And Waters Evans, you didn't catch any.
No, and I left. You guys took my job. I have nothing to do with it.
Go solve your city council problem.
Not a problem. I prefer
Select board.
a challenge.
Yes, no, not a problem. It's an opportunity.
Yes, that's right. Even better.
He was
online from Wyoming.
Oh, skiing.
Yeah.
Everybody had a chance to scroll through? All right. Is there any further questions, or I would entertain a motion to move draft 4.4?
I'll make a motion motion that we vote in favor of draft 4.4.
Is there any further discussion?
I just want to say that I really hope that any other committee of jurisdiction that looks at this will talk about the terminology that's used that's quite ambiguous in my mind, that it is, it's a very subjective term. And I feel like it is up to the people who are weighing in on judgment on this, that it's a very heavy responsibility for them to decide what fear of imminent serious physical harm is. So perhaps any other committees that may be looking at this, I would hope that they take that discussion seriously and take it to another level and have a little more time than we did to delve into that.
Any other thoughts on this bill? Well, I want to thank the committee for taking a lot of time on the bill generally. When I first talked with folks who had been on the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Committee, had helped with the report, the Attorney General had brought it to my attention, and had talked with me and Senator Hardy about trying to get these recommendations done this year, and then talked with Representative Salone and his Senate counterpart about doing the other recommendations that are more in judiciary's wheelhouse. This seemed like a pretty easy lift initially, and then it opened up questions about how we define law enforcement conduct that we're seeing come up with the Brady letter issue, that we're seeing, the Criminal Justice Council kind of wrestle with the limits of what they're allowed to do. And I think this was a good opportunity for us to take some steps toward maybe preventing some domestic violence fatalities in the future, but also giving ourselves an education onto some of these ambiguities and the process of how we deal with what happens when a law enforcement officer has conduct that gives rise to concern, and how we have due process and adjudicate those issues. So I appreciate all the work and the diligence on this. This was some heavy stuff and a big lift, and we've all brought a lot of thoughtful consideration, and the stakeholders, certainly challenged my thinking about some of the initial versions of this bill. And I think we arrived at a place where it was really great to hear both law enforcement, the network, the Attorney General's office all say, yeah, you've got something that we can all support today. So we're proud to vote yes for this bill. Representative Cooper?
I'm not blowing smoke here, but, having been involved in this for a while, it impressed me that law enforcement had come to the point of, we're willing to try to solve the problem rather than there is no problem, which had been the attitude for far too long.
We've got some pretty amazing law enforcement leaders in Vermont. I mean,
yes,
we've spent time in this committee talking about some of the issues that we've had with some law enforcement leaders, but you're absolutely right that the folks that worked on this bill, Commissioner Morrison, Vermont State Police, Chief Burke, that we really have incredible law enforcement leaders here in Vermont. They're very different from folks you might have seen 15, 20, 30 years ago saying, no, this isn't us. Great. Well, any further comments on this? I think we've done it. The clerk shall commence the call of the roll.
Representative Byron,
yes.
Representative Boyden, yes. Representative Hanko,
Yes.
Representative Morgan,
Yes.
Representative Cooper of Burlington,
Yes.
Representative Malicki,
Yes.
Representative Chase,
Yes.
Representative Waters Evans,
Yes.
Representative Cooper of Randolph,
Yes.
Representative Nugent, Representative Higley,
Yes.
Representative McCarthy,
Yes.
11-11.
Thank you very much. Representative Wooden has agreed to be the reporter of this bill and has been working diligently and staying on top of the various drafts over the last few weeks. So appreciate that. Senator Boyden. So for tomorrow, we will not be meeting at 8:30. We will be picking up our conversation on the Criminal Justice Council recommendations 15 minutes out before. I know that I'm going to try to bring in Chief Lamock from St. Albans PD, who was going to talk to us a little bit about the need for some of the alternative paths to law enforcement and their perspective around some of the training and the council. We'll be hearing from folks from the council and some outside of the council trainers that can talk to some of the questions we've had about competency. I think we've got language ready to go with a report back that we're talking about doing on the from number of hours to competency as well. So we'll be continuing that discussion even if we move this bill forward. So that'll be our working committee tomorrow. We have really done a lot this week, and I really appreciate all of you. Yeah, you're working so hard. So thank you, thank you. And I want to give big kudos to Andrea for keeping everything on track. Yeah, been a lot. And Tim, I know you're not feeling 100%, so thank you for the great work today.
Thanks,
Of
Tim.
course, you're very welcome.
He looks hurt a little bit.
He does.
Sounds